I sat on the edge of my bed with a picture frame in my hands. The glass was cool, the smile in the photo frozen forever. His smile. My husband's smile. It had been 2 years since I lost him, and still, some mornings I woke up reaching for the other side of the bed, forgetting that it was empty. My name is Emily. I'm 31 years old and I live in a small town outside of Denver, Colorado. On the surface, my life looks steady. I have a good job at the local library. I pay my rent on time. I smile when neighbors wave, laugh at work when someone tells a joke, and post little updates on social media that make it look like I'm doing fine. People tell me, "You're so strong," and I nod politely because that's what's expected. But the truth is, I was not strong. I was broken. And the lie I lived with every single day was pretending I was okay. Inside, grief followed me everywhere. I carried it to the grocery store where I still caught myself buying his favorite cereal. I carried it at work when I reached for my phone during lunch to text him something funny, only to remember I couldn't. At night, when the apartment was silent, the grief pressed hardest against my chest. It felt like someone had built a wall around my heart and locked me inside. Friends tried to help. They invited me out for dinners, introduced me to new people, told me gently that I was young and had my whole life ahead of me. "One day you'll love again," they said. I always smiled and nodded, but inside I wanted to scream. Because how could I love again when I hadn't even learned how to stop missing him? I told myself I was healing. I told myself that by keeping busy, by smiling, by acting fine, I was moving forward. But late at night, when the world was quiet, I knew the truth. I was stuck. I was living in a loop of memories, pretending to be alive when most days I felt like a ghost. Last week someone asked me if I believed in second chances. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came. My chest tightened as tears filled my eyes. Because deep down I knew I was still living in the past. And that was the lie I lived with. Morning light came through my thin curtains like soft water. I stood in the kitchen and watched the dust float in the air. The kettle clicked. The apartment felt clean and calm, like a picture in a magazine. Sometimes I thought if a stranger walked in right now, they would say I was doing well. They would see the tidy counter, the small houseplants by the window, the neatly stacked books. They would not see the empty place inside my chest. I poured tea into my favorite mug, the one with tiny blue stars. I still used 2 mugs out of habit. I placed both on the table, then remembered and took one away. I told myself it was fine, just a small mistake. But it wasn't small. It was every morning. I work at the town library. People there are kind. "Good morning, Emily," they say when I walk in. I shelve books, fix a torn page, help a child find a story about dogs. I smile a lot. My smile feels soft from the outside and stiff from the inside. At lunch, I sit by the back window and look at the mountains. I pretend the quiet is peace. Often it is not. It is just quiet. Sometimes a regular visitor, Mr. Allen, brings cookies. He is in his 70s and talks about his late wife. He says, "Grief sits down with you. Then one day it stands up and stretches, but it doesn't leave." I nod because I know what he means. I go back to the stacks and run my fingers along the spines of books. I think of my husband's hands. His name was Ethan. Saying his name in my head still feels like stepping on something sharp. On Saturdays, my friend Mia drags me to the farmer's market. She means well. She picks up peaches, smells them, and makes me taste free samples of cheese. "You're doing great," she says. "You're getting out." I nod and chew and swallow. The sun on my face feels warm. The noise around me feels far away. Mia looks at me like she wants to fix me, but also like she knows she can't. She squeezes my arm. "You're allowed to be happy again, Em." I say, "I know. I do not know. My apartment is my beautiful prison. I keep everything neat because I can control it. I fold dish towels into perfect rectangles. I line up spices with the labels facing forward. I water the little plant Ethan gave me on our first anniversary. It leans toward the window like a mouth opening. I keep his jacket on the back of the bedroom door. Sometimes I brush my fingers over it when I pass, as if I can touch him through the fabric. The apartment is safe. The apartment is lonely. Both are true. Friends invite me to dinners. I go sometimes. I listen to people talk about work and trips and small fights that end in jokes. I laugh at the right times. Then I go home and sit on the sofa and feel the quiet settle over me like a blanket that is too heavy to lift. I turn on the TV and turn it off again. I read the same line in a book 3 times and can't remember it. One Friday evening, Mia came over with takeout. We sat on the floor with noodles and fortune cookies. "You should try one date," she said softly. "Just coffee. No pressure." I felt my stomach twist. "I'm not ready." She leaned her head to one side. "Ready doesn't come like a bus on time, it sneaks up on you. Or you make it." I stared at the little white box in my lap. "If I try, is it betraying him?" She reached for my hand. "You don't betray the dead by living." The sentence hung between us like a bell that had just been struck. I nodded and said nothing. Later that night when she left, I tried to be brave. I downloaded a dating app. The bright colors and smiling faces made me feel dizzy. I typed, "Emily, 31, and then stared at the empty box for "About Me." I wrote, "I like books and tea." I deleted it. I tried again, looking for someone kind. I deleted that too. My throat tightened. After 5 minutes, I pressed and held the app icon until it shook, and then I deleted it. The quiet in the room came back like a tide. At the library the next day, a woman returned a book with a yellow sticky note on the first page. "This helped me. Thank you." I held the note and felt tears rise for no reason. Or for every reason. I took the long way home after work, past the small lake where Ethan and I used to walk. The water was flat and dark like slate. A little boy threw a stick for his dog. The dog ran into the water, brave and sure. I stood very still. I tell myself I am moving forward because I am not crying all the time. Because I am paying bills and showing up and eating food and getting out of bed. But moving forward without turning around to see what you carry is not moving. It is dragging. There are days I talk to him out loud. Just a few words in the kitchen or in the car at a red light. "You would have liked this song. I fixed the leaky faucet. I miss you." The sound of my own voice in the empty room makes me feel weak and human and a little less alone. One afternoon I tried a grief group at the community center. 5 chairs in a circle. A box of tissues in the middle. A woman with silver hair said it had been 10 years for her and some days felt like day one. A man held a baseball cap in both hands and kept twisting it. When it was my turn, I said, "I work at a library," and then I started to cry without warning. The leader nodded as if crying was a language she understood. I left early and sat in my car and watched rain collect on the windshield. I felt both lighter and heavier. A week later, Mia brought a small box of lemon cookies and a plan. "There's a music night at the cafe. We could go." I shook my head too fast. "Another time." She looked at me for a long second. "You're not hiding from the world, right?" I tried to make a joke. "Just walking around it." She smiled sadly. "You're allowed to walk through it." After she left, I put the cookies in a glass jar. I ate one and tasted only sugar and memory. That evening, I cleaned the bedroom to keep my hands busy. I refolded sweaters that were already folded. I changed the pillowcases. I opened the closet and stood there with the light on, not looking for anything, just looking. The smell of fabric and wood rose up. In the back, behind a box of winter boots, Ethan's coat hung by itself. Dark gray. Oh, the one he wore the day we signed our lease. The day we said, home. I reached out and pulled it toward me. It felt heavier than I remembered. For a long moment I just held it against my chest. The wool was cold. I closed my eyes and breathed in. It didn't smell like him anymore. It smelled like the closet. That made something inside me ache in a new way. I slipped my hand into the side pocket. My fingers found a coin, a button, a folded receipt. My heart thudded, but I didn't know why. I checked the other pocket. A paper tissue, a small key I didn't recognize. Then I slid my hand into the inside pocket, the one near the lining. My fingertips touched a smooth rectangle. I pulled it out slowly. It was his old phone. I stared at it, shocked, as if I were holding a bird that might fly. My hands began to tremble. The screen was dark, covered in fine dust. I wiped it on the sleeve of the coat. My breath came short and shallow. I sat down on the edge of the bed with the phone in my lap and the coat beside me. For a few seconds I could hear only the sound of my heartbeat. I plugged it into the charger on my nightstand, not even sure why I still had that cable. A small light blinked. The screen glowed faint at first, then clear. The lock screen showed a picture of the lake in summer, the one by our house. My throat tightened. I swiped and somehow it opened. No code was set. The home screen looked exactly the way he left it. The little icons arranged in neat rows. A folder named Notes. A folder named Lists. A small red dot in the corner of the phone icon. I tapped it. One message sat there saved. I didn't press play. Not yet. I sat very still, staring at the words, feeling the room tilt, feeling time bend. My hands shook so hard I had to put the phone down on the bedspread to keep from dropping it. That night I opened his old jacket, and found something that made my hands shake. A single saved voicemail was waiting on his old phone. The phone glowed faintly on the bed, the word voicemail staring back at me. My chest tightened as if an invisible hand pressed against it. For minutes I couldn't move. My fingers hovered above the play button, but I was afraid. Afraid of hearing his voice after so long. Afraid it would tear me open. Afraid it would remind me that the man I loved was still gone, no matter what words came through that tiny speaker. Finally, with trembling hands I pressed play. The sound filled the room, his voice. "Hey Em, it's me. I'm just on my way home. Thought I'd grab dinner unless you've already cooked. Call me back, okay? Love you." The message was ordinary. Simple. A voice from an ordinary day. But it broke me more than any goodbye could have. Because it reminded me that once love was not about loss. Once it was about everyday things. About dinners and laughter and soft touches before sleep. I pressed the phone to my chest and cried until I couldn't breathe. The voicemail ended, but his voice kept echoing inside me. Love you, love you, love you. That night I remembered everything. Ethan and I met when I was 25. I was working late at the library, stacking new arrivals onto shelves. He was there looking for a book on hiking trails. He had messy hair, a backpack slung over one shoulder, and a smile that warmed the air around him. He asked if I could help him find a trail guide, and when I handed it to him, our fingers touched. Something sparked, soft but certain. We started seeing each other often after that. Long walks by the lake. Coffee dates that stretched into hours. He told me once, "I don't believe in soulmates, but I believe in choices. And I choose you." I laughed then, not realizing how deeply those words would live in me. Life with him wasn't perfect, but it was full. We argued about silly things. What color to paint the kitchen, how many pillows belonged on the couch. But we always made up with laughter. He held me when I had bad days, and I held him when work drained him. We were building something. We were building a future. Until the day it all stopped. It was a rainy night. He left to pick up groceries. He said he'd be back in 20 minutes. He never came back. A car accident, sudden and cruel. One moment he was calling me from the road, the next moment he was gone. The days after were a blur. Funeral flowers. Condolences from people who didn't know what to say. My body moved, but my heart was stuck in that single night, waiting for him to walk through the door. People told me grief softens with time. They were wrong. It didn't soften, it hid. It sank deeper into places I couldn't reach. And it lived there, quietly shaping everything I did. For months I carried his jacket everywhere. I wore it to bed even in summer. I kept his toothbrush in the bathroom. I couldn't throw away the cereal he liked, even when it went stale. My house became a museum of him, and I was the keeper of the exhibits. But eventually people started to worry. Friends pushed me to go out. My parents told me gently, "He would want you to live." I nodded, but their words felt like knives. Because living felt like leaving him behind. And then came the loneliness. Loneliness so heavy it sat in my bones. That's when I started forcing myself to move forward. I smiled more. I stopped wearing his jacket outside. I even agreed to blind dates, though I spent most of them pretending to listen. The truth was, every man I met only reminded me of what I had lost. That was when I realized, I wasn't trying to find love. I was trying to bury my ghost. For a long time I believed if I built enough new memories, the old ones would fade. If I filled my days with noise, the silence of grief would disappear. But ghosts don't go away. They wait. They linger in the corners of photos, in the sound of a familiar song, in the faint smell of cologne on an old coat. The voicemail proved it. After 2 years, just one message undid me completely. I lay awake all night, the phone on my pillow. The glow dimmed and went dark, but I could still hear his voice in my head. I thought about the life we dreamed of, the children we wanted, the places we would travel, the house with a garden he promised to build. All of it gone in a flash of headlights on a wet road. The next morning I dragged myself to work. My co-workers chatted about weekend plans. I forced smiles, but inside I felt hollow. When a child asked me for a book about families, I almost broke down. I realized something then. I wasn't living. I was surviving. I was filling time, waiting for grief to decide when it was done with me. And in the process I had lost myself. The ghost wasn't Ethan. The ghost was me. The version of me that stopped growing the night he died. The version of me that still lived in that rainy night, unable to step forward. That evening I sat by the window with the voicemail playing again and again. I whispered into the empty room, "How do I live without betraying you? How do I love again without losing you?" No answer came. Only silence. But for the first time I saw the truth. I had been holding on not out of love but out of fear. Fear that letting go meant forgetting him. Fear that loving again meant erasing him. But maybe, just maybe, love wasn't about holding on to the past. Maybe it was about carrying it with me gently while stepping into something new. I thought I had buried my past, until his voice reminded me that love never really dies. It only changes shape. For weeks after I found Ethan's old phone and listened to that voicemail, I told myself I was fine. I told myself hearing his voice had given me strength. I convinced myself I could carry on, that I was finally learning to let him go. It was easier to pretend than to face the truth, that the sound of his voice had torn open every wound I had tried so hard to close. So I went back to my routines. At the library I smiled at coworkers, checked in books, and helped children with school projects. I laughed at jokes I didn't really find funny. I went out for lunch with Mia and nodded along as she talked about her latest crush. I wore brighter clothes, as if a pink sweater could trick my heart into believing it wasn't still grieving. From the outside I probably looked like I was doing better. But inside I was still carrying the same weight. Pretending didn't lighten it. Just hid it from others. One Friday evening Mia came over with wine and pizza. She looked at me carefully and said, "You seem different. Lighter. Are you okay?" I hesitated, then smiled. "Yeah, I'm fine." She tilted her head. "You don't have to be fine, you know." Her words sat heavy in the air. I brushed them away with a laugh. "Really, I'm okay." But later that night after she left, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her voice echoed in my head. "You don't have to be fine." The next day at the library, a coworker named Sarah invited me to a small dinner party at her house. At first I wanted to say no, but something in me whispered that I needed to try. So I said yes. That evening I stood in front of my closet, staring at dresses I hadn't worn in years. Finally I chose a simple navy one and brushed my hair back. When I arrived at Sarah's, the room was full of laughter, music, and the smell of pasta baking in the oven. People talked about work, vacations, kids. I smiled, joined conversations, even laughed. But the whole time I felt like a shadow moving through light. At one point Sarah introduced me to her cousin Daniel. He was kind, with gentle eyes and a quiet way of speaking. We talked about books, about hiking trails near town, about our favorite places to eat. For a moment I almost forgot the weight in my chest. For a moment I felt normal. But when he smiled at me in a way that felt familiar, my stomach twisted. It was too much too soon. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, closing the door behind me. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My cheeks were flushed, my eyes wide. I whispered to myself, "You're not ready. You're pretending." That night I went home and cried. Not just for Ethan but for myself, for the way I kept forcing myself into situations I wasn't ready for. A few days later at the library I overheard two coworkers talking about how strong I was. "Emily's amazing," one said. "She's been through so much, but look at her, always smiling." Their words stung. Because I wasn't strong. I was just pretending. The pretending started to crack in small ways. One afternoon while shelving books I dropped one and burst into tears in the quiet aisle. A coworker rushed over, alarmed, but I brushed it off, saying I was tired. Another time, Mia found me sitting in my car in the grocery store parking lot, unable to go inside. She knocked on the window and asked what was wrong. I said I was fine, but she didn't believe me. He sat in the car with me until I stopped shaking. Finally, one evening, Mia came over unannounced. She found me sitting on the kitchen floor, Ethan's coat in my lap, the phone in my hand. I had been listening to that voicemail on repeat for hours. She knelt beside me and took the phone gently from my hands. She whispered, tears in her own eyes, "You can't keep doing this to yourself." I sobbed into her shoulder. "I don't know how to stop. If I let go, it feels like I'm betraying him." She pulled back and held my face in her hands. "You're not betraying him by living. You're betraying yourself by staying stuck. He loved you. He would never want you to stay in pain forever." Her words cut deep. I wanted to believe them. But guilt clung to me like a second skin. For the first time, though, I admitted the truth out loud. "I'm not okay." The room went quiet. Saying those words felt like tearing open a dam. For so long I had been pretending. Pretending for my friends, my coworkers, even myself. But the truth was simple. I wasn't okay. Mia squeezed my hands. "Then let's start there." The days after that conversation were different. I didn't suddenly feel healed. But I stopped pretending so much. When people asked how I was, I said, "I'm struggling." When I couldn't handle a social event, I said no instead of forcing myself. At the library, I took breaks when I needed them. But even as I started being honest with others, the guilt still whispered inside me. The guilt of imagining a future without Ethan. The guilt of smiling at another man's kindness. The guilt of living when he could not. One evening, I found myself walking by the lake where Ethan and I used to go. The water shimmered under the setting sun. Couples walked hand in hand. Children ran along the path. I sat on a bench and let the breeze wash over me. For the first time, I whispered into the air, "I don't know how to do this without you." The wind rustled the trees as if carrying my words away. I closed my eyes and listened. For a moment, I felt him near, not as a ghost but as a memory that would always live in me. That night, lying in bed, I realized something important. Pretending had kept me alive, but it hadn't helped me heal. And healing didn't mean forgetting him. It meant learning to carry him with me while making space for myself. She said I looked like someone carrying a love that wasn't mine. And in that moment, I stopped pretending. Alright, raising hands now, let's move into the emotional core. Part 5. The conversation that broke us for. Can you love again after loss? Target, 1200 to 1300 words, 6 minutes voiceover. Tone, first person diary-like, emotional, soft but piercing. Orange Square Part 5. The conversation that broke us. 1-250 words. It happened on a quiet evening, the kind that felt too normal for what was about to unfold. Daniel had asked me out for coffee again. I almost said no, but Mia's voice echoed in my head. "You don't betray the dead by living." So I said yes. We sat in a small cafe downtown. The smell of roasted beans and cinnamon filled the air. He talked about his work, about a hike he wanted to take in the spring. I listened, smiled, even laughed once or twice. For a while it felt easy, like maybe I could belong in a moment again. But then he asked me softly, "Do you think you're ready for this? For someone new?" The question froze me. My smile faded. My throat tightened. I stared into my cup, watching the steam curl upward. My hands began to shake. Finally I whispered, "No, I'm not." Silence stretched between us. He didn't rush to fill it. He just waited, his kind eyes steady on me. "I thought I was," I said finally. "I wanted to be. But the truth is, I'm still living with someone who isn't here anymore. My husband, his name was Ethan, he died 2 years ago. And I never really left him." Daniel nodded gently as if he had expected it. Tears blurred my vision. "I keep pretending I'm okay, but I'm not. I still talk to him. I still wear his coat sometimes. I found his phone last month and listened to his voice again, and it broke me." I bit my lip, my words trembling. How can I give my heart to someone else when it still belongs to him? Daniel leaned forward, his voice soft but steady. You don't have to give it away, Emily. You can carry him with you. Love doesn't vanish when someone dies. It just changes shape. I covered my face with my hands. The tears spilled over. But if I love again, does that mean I'm betraying him? He shook his head. No. You betray yourself by stopping. You betray him by letting his love be the reason you never live again. His words hit me harder than I expected. I sat there, sobbing quietly in a corner of a cafe, while strangers passed by outside the window, living their ordinary lives. And for the first time I didn't feel judged. I just felt seen. After a while I wiped my eyes. My chest felt hollow but lighter somehow. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. You don't have to know right now, he said. You just have to start. We didn't talk much after that. He walked me to my car, and when he reached out to hug me I hesitated, then let him. His arms felt warm and safe but different. Not Ethan's. Never Ethan's. And maybe that was okay. That night I went home and sat on the floor of my bedroom with Ethan's coat in my lap. I whispered, I told someone about you today. I cried in front of him. I don't know if I can do this, but I think I have to try. The silence that followed was deep but not empty. For the first time it felt like maybe he was giving me permission. The following week Daniel texted me. No pressure. Just friends. Want to walk by the lake. I stared at the message for a long time. The lake. Our lake. A place filled with memories I both cherished and feared. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Finally I typed back. Okay. The walk was slow, careful. We didn't touch. We just talked. About books, about life, about loss. At one point he said, I lost my mom 5 years ago. Grief doesn't leave, does it? I shook my head. No. It just changes how it lives in you. The words surprised me. They sounded like truth. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, the sky turned soft shades of pink and orange. I felt a pang, remembering how Ethan used to squeeze my hand during sunsets. But then I looked at Daniel walking beside me, giving me space without asking for anything. And I realized something. Maybe love didn't replace love. Maybe it simply added to it. When I got home I sat at my desk and opened my journal. For the first time in years I wrote not just about loss but about hope. My handwriting was shaky, the words unsure, but they were there. Maybe I can live again. Maybe I can love again. And maybe that doesn't mean forgetting him. I closed the journal and whispered into the quiet room, I'm trying, Ethan. I'm really trying. I don't know if he heard me. But I felt a small sense of peace, the kind I hadn't felt in a very long time. I left. And as I closed the door, his words followed me home. You don't betray the dead by living. Life didn't change overnight. Healing never does. But after that conversation with Daniel, after speaking my truth out loud, the storm inside me began to settle. Some mornings were still hard. I still woke up reaching for the other side of the bed. I still kept Ethan's jacket hanging in the closet, though I no longer held it every night. The grief was still there, but it didn't crush me the way it used to. It lived inside me quietly, like a shadow that followed me, but no longer controlled every step. I started to write again. At first, just small notes in my journal. Memories of Ethan, moments of grief, tiny sparks of hope. Some pages were tear-stained, others held shaky words like, I smiled today without feeling guilty. Writing became a way to let both pain and healing live side by side. Daniel and I stayed in touch. Sometimes we had coffee, sometimes just short walks by the lake. He never pushed me. He never asked for more than I could give. His patience felt like a gift. For the first time in 2 years I felt seen, not only as a widow, not only as someone broken, but as a woman who was still alive. One evening after work I sat by the lake alone. The sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky gold and purple. I remembered all the evenings Ethan and I had spent there, how he would point at the clouds and tell me they looked like castles or ships. The memory made me ache, but it also made me smile. I whispered softly, I'll always carry you with me. The breeze moved across the water like an answer. In that moment I realized something important. Healing wasn't about letting go. It was about making room for the past, for the present, and for whatever future might come. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, my apartment began to look less like a museum of loss and more like a home again. I packed away some of Ethan's things, not to forget him but to give myself space to breathe. I kept the things that mattered most. The jacket, the photo frame, a book with his handwriting in the margins. One afternoon while cleaning I found a letter at the back of a drawer. It was in Ethan's handwriting. My heart stopped. The envelope was yellowed at the edges. I sat down on the floor and opened it carefully. It was short. Just a note he had written before our anniversary 1 year. Emily, I don't know what the future will bring. But I do know this. Whatever happens, I want you to keep living. Promise me that. Tears rolled down my face as I held the letter. It felt like a message carried across time, arriving when I needed it most. I whispered, I promise. That night I slept more peacefully than I had in years. Now when people ask how I'm doing, I don't say fine. I say, I'm healing. Because it's the truth. Healing doesn't mean the pain is gone. Healing means I'm learning to live with it. Sometimes I still listen to that voicemail. But now instead of breaking me, it comforts me. His voice reminds me of love that was real, love that shaped me, love that will always be part of me. And when Daniel smiles at me across the table, I don't feel guilt anymore. I feel gratitude. Gratitude that life can give me more than one chapter. Gratitude that I can carry Ethan in my heart while opening the door to someone new. The silence after the storm is not empty. It's calm. Space to breathe, to rebuild, to love again. Not instead but in addition. So if you've ever felt like me, if you've ever wondered if your heart can survive breaking and still learn to love again, know this. You're not alone. Grief may stay but so does love. Both can live inside you. And one day the storm will pass. The silence will come. And in that silence you'll hear it, your own heart still beating, still ready, still alive. If you've ever felt like me, you're not alone. Tell me your story in the comments.